Okay, I am going to take you through the basic steps of setting up your lab notebook for the purpose of the Law of Conservation of Mass Lab. The paper you want to locate is one that says Lab Write-Up Requirements. I usually make it a pretty color so that you can't lose it. You also can find it online in my big campus if needed. So you want to find the paper that says Lab Write-Up Requirements first. Locate that. So if you need to pause, find that. You also need your lab notebook. Okay, you also need your lab notebook. So get those 2 sheets of paper, and once you're ready, go ahead and hit press play again and we'll get started with it. Okay, so what you want to do in your lab notebooks is go ahead and open up a new, not necessarily a new page, but get ready to start a new lab. I'm not particular on writing on the back. You may have received other instructions from your teacher, so follow what you need to do. But up at the top of the paper, you also should have your Law of Conservation of Mass Lab handout as well, that you probably will want to keep out to follow with as well. So up top, we're going to put the title, which is Law of Conservation of Mass. So you're going to write that up at the top. What I'm going to do is take you through how you set up typically what's called pre-lab. Okay, that's what I'm going to focus on right now. The expectations, lab write-up should be very neatly handwritten. Crossouts are acceptable as science is not perfect. There is no perfect set length of writing, but you want to need to say what you have to. Should be your own unique work. Okay, I think that should go without setup. So without discussion. What I'm going to focus on right here is says oftentimes section 1 through 5 will be completed as a pre-lab prior to performing the actual lab. When you come in, I will ask you to take your lab notebooks out so that I can initial it and sign off on it that you were ready. If not, you're going to be in the corner watching your video, getting it set up and missing points for the lab. So this is the types of things that you want to do ahead of time. And so like I said, what I'm going to focus on today is we're actually going to go 1 through 6 on this one so that we're ready to rock, but we're going to focus on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 and get this set up in our lab notebooks. So the heading, you'll see it says list your name, the date, where am I here? List the name, your date, and your lab partners at the title. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So if we come back over here, we've already got the title, Law of Conservation of Mass. You typically want to do the date that you are doing the lab on. So I'm just going to leave the date blank for right now. So you'll fill in whatever date you're going to do the lab. You also want to have your name somewhere up near the top of the paper. And honestly, this is so when I'm flipping through that I can reread it again. And you also want to list out your lab partner. We are going to do this on sides of the lab station in pairs. So since Mr. Wilhelm is the other chemistry teacher, we'll put him in there as my lab partner here on this. Okay, so we've got date, we've got title, we've got heading, so that when you open up to it, you know what you're looking at. Now the next part is going to be the purpose. Okay, so number 2 here is the purpose. And you'll look, in other words, it says why do we care and why are we doing the activity. So in a few sentences, you want to explain what it is that we're doing in the lab. Typically you may see the word objective or introduction. Sometimes it will be spelled out for you like it is on this lab, sometimes not so much. Sometimes you got to actually just think about it and just tell me what's the big goal. So for this particular one, for the purpose, I've given it to you. So again, everything that I'm writing down here needs to be in your lab notebooks. The purpose of this lab is to demonstrate that mass is conserved in a chemical reaction between 2 household substances. Okay, so what we're going to try to do is collect some data that actually supports the law of conservation of mass. Our data may support it, it may not, so we may have some errors there, but we're going to try to demonstrate that it does. Okay, the next part you're going to have, number 3, is safety precautions. Okay, now sometimes the safety precautions will be listed. If you look on this lab, it is not. So sometimes we just need to use some common sense. Almost always for safety precautions, you can put safety goggles. Sorry, my handwriting's not the best on this. So you can always have safety goggles. You also can always do things, say something along the lines of use care with chemicals. Okay. You know, common sense, things you paid attention to in your safety contract. You're not going to eat them, you're not going to do anything foolish, you're not going to do anything that's you're not instructed to do. So, in other words, safety precautions. Sometimes we'll have open flame, glassware, you know, those types of scenarios. Okay, after safety precautions, the next piece to do is materials. And with materials, you're going to notice it says list with numbers. The equipment and the chemicals, you can use formulas or symbols. And this should be numbered list and may include things that are not on the formal lab report. So sometimes you will be asked to design your own procedure, in which case you have to go back and update your materials. But if as you're using the lab you use other things, you should make sure to include them. So for this lab, you can see on the handout that there are 8 materials listed. So what you want to do here is go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and write down all 8, 6, 7, and 8. Write down all 8 pieces of equipment. If you don't know what something is when you get to the lab, obviously please ask and we'll point out what it is, but you need to pause here and write down all 8 pieces of equipment that you'll be using in the lab. Okay, once you're done, second to last piece we're going to do today is the procedure. Now, on a pre-designed lab procedure, I want you to have read it and have some idea of what you're doing. So I'm going to force you to summarize it. And for right now, the technique that we're going to use to summarize is that I want you to summarize it. Oh, well, let me highlight it. That's okay. I want you to summarize it in paragraph form. Okay, do not, summarizing, you need to summarize. You do not have to copy the entire handout. Okay, it should be detailed enough so someone else read the procedure, they would know what you did, but you may say, see lab handout for details at the end of that procedure. Okay, so you don't have to give every single step. You need to read it, summarize it in a paragraph. There will be times when you have to design your own and you have to do detailed numbered step by step like you did with the separation of mixtures lab, but for when it's already given to you, you need to summarize in a paragraph. So if you come on back to our notebook page, the next section that you want to have is procedure. And again, you need to write things down the way that I am. Underline the headings, separate the sections. So in your procedure in your notebook, what I want you to do is go ahead and pause the video, read that procedure, and give me a paragraph. As a reminder, a paragraph usually has at least 3 to 4 sentences, so you need to give me enough detail to follow. If you've summarized it down to 1 line, you probably haven't given me enough detail. So you're going to go ahead and summarize your procedure in here in paragraph form. Okay, and once you're done with that, go ahead and unpause the video and we'll do our last section. Okay, after the procedure, I'm also going to go ahead and get your data table set up for you so that you're ready to rock once we get into the lab the next time that we get to class. So the next thing that you're going to do is a data table. Now notice it says observations / data / graphs. So this is where our observations are going to go, both qualitative from an observation perspective, qualitative for an observation perspective and quantitative for this particular lab because we're dealing with data. So in your lab notebook says this is where you describe what you observed and provide any necessary data tables. You cannot be too detailed and pictures will always help. If you can draw a labeled picture and that helps explain what you saw, go for it. Okay, so, and like we've done before, the graphs that we've produced should be sketched in this section. So underneath procedure, what I want you to do is we'll go ahead and we'll get our data table set up. And let's see if I can't figure out the fancy way to do this. In my class, if you want to use a ruler, great, so long as the data table is there. That's really what I am looking for on this in there. Okay, you are going to be doing 2 trials. You're going to be doing trial 1, and I want you to put go back there. Trial 1, I want you to put no balloon. And then you're going to do trial 2, and I want you to put with balloon. Okay, so we'll come back in, and then what you're going to measure for each one is for each trial you need to make 2 measurements and do 1 calculation that we're going to build into this data table. The first thing you're going to do is write down your initial mass in grams. And the instructions are very detailed in terms of what needs to be on the balance and what doesn't, so read the directions. Okay, it's very frustrating when the directions are right in front of you and you say, what needs to go on the balance? And I say, look at the paper. So there's your initial mass. Then the next thing you're going to end up doing is doing your final mass, okay, in grams. And then the only calculation you're going to have to do, because we're looking for the law of conservation of mass, we want to see what the change in mass was. So you'll take those 2 numbers and you will subtract them, and you will get a change in mass for that particular trial. Okay, so you're going to mass everything before, you're going to run it, you're going to mass it after, and then you subtract those 2 numbers to end up with a change in mass. And that will be a reflection of how well we did the lab. The last thing I need you to put in there underneath your data is go ahead and put observations. And if you remember, we are going to do observations. You need to make sure you have a comment on before, during, and after the lab so that you can report on what you saw, and then use, when you do your discussion, use that data and those observations. Okay, so you should have all of these things in your lab notebook. When you come into class, I'll ask you to take it out, I'll sign off on it, and then we'll be ready.